We're learning more about the work Ncba does right here in Washington and how it protects the freedom to operate for cattle-producing families all across our country. Now joining us, Mary Thomas Hart. She's the Ncba Deputy Environmental Counsel. Mary Thomas, thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You know, the waters of the United States is a rule that just simply doesn't seem to want to go away. Can you give us an update on where we stand with this?
Well, Kevin, I think we both know that the speed of the federal government is about as fast as molasses, but getting the federal waters of the United States rule to go away is proving especially tough. Just as a refresher, in February 2017, President Trump issued an executive order directing the EPA to rescind and replace the 2015 Wotus rule. So a lot of people thought that that executive order was it, that Wotus was done. But I like to think of it as more of the starting pistol for a marathon. It's an important step, but on its own doesn't have a lot of impact. So that action, that executive order, really put in effect EPA's regulatory process. So we're in the middle of that process now. Ncba is engaging in that process, and we fully expect EPA to finalize rescission of the 2015 Wotus rule in spring 2019.
Now remind us specifically of the risks that the Wotus rule would bring to cattle-producing families.
The 2015 rule would have been extremely problematic for cattle producers. It was a gross overreach by the federal government in an attempt to regulate ditches and other dry features on private property. In fact, 3 federal courts across the country have already ruled that it's likely illegal. So we're really happy to see it go.
So if the first step is for EPA to actually rescind the rule, then what happens next?
Well, I think that it's important to note that the term, or the phrase, waters of the United States, isn't something that the EPA came up with. That's a term that's in statute, that's in the Clean Water Act. And in 2006, the Supreme Court directed the EPA to define waters of the United States. The 2015 rule is the product of that direction, albeit a bad product. But when the 2015 rule is gone, there's still going to be a requirement from the Supreme Court to define Wotus. And we look forward to that because the term waters of the United States is pretty vague. And without some parameters around that term, EPA basically has a blank check.
Sure.
So when we look to defining waters of the United States, Ncba and cattle producers really need 2 things: clean water and clear rules. Clean water is necessary to keep our families safe and our cattle safe. But without clear rules, our businesses won't survive. And I really do think that Congress intended that there be a balance between clean water and clear rules. And that balance comes when states have the ability and the power and the authority to work with stakeholders and effectively implement water quality standards.
I love it. Clean water and clear rules.
Yes.
That's one to remember.
Yep.
Now, a couple of other laws that could impact producers, as I understand, are CERCLA and EPCRA. Can you tell our viewers what those laws are and how they might impact us?
Yeah, this is just an example of a bad case decision leading to a bad standard. In April 2017, the DC Circuit Court subjected nearly 200,000 livestock producers to ammonia and hydrogen sulfide reporting requirements under CERCLA and EPCRA. Now, under CERCLA, reports are filed with the EPA and Coast Guard, and under EPCRA, reports are filed with state and local emergency responders. And I think it's important to remember that these aren't highly concentrated releases like an anhydrous ammonia gas tank. These are diffuse emissions from manure. So really odor emissions.
Wow.
And it's ridiculous. Luckily, Congress also thought it was ridiculous. So a bipartisan Congress passed legislation in both the House and the Senate. That legislation was entitled the Farm Act, not to be confused with the Farm Bill. That legislation was passed in the spring and signed into law by the president. So luckily, livestock producers are exempt from reporting requirements under CERCLA. And EPA is currently going through a regulatory process to exempt livestock producers from reporting requirements under EPCRA. So more to come on that front, but we're really excited.
Wow, that is true government overreach, and I'm so glad we have people like you here in D.C. watching out for our interests. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you.
As cattlemen and women know all too well, Congress isn't the only place in Washington that can have an impact on our business. From EPA to USDA, federal regulation can hit the beef cattle industry as well. To join Ncba in the fight against regulatory overreach, call 1-866-233-3872 or visit the website joinncba.org.